Buenas tardes a todos o buenos días.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for being with us for this second day of our seminar. Today's program
Vamos a hacer primero una sesión número 3.
is what you see on the screen. First, we're going to have session number 3
about
about road safety and gender inclusion. We're going to have Imen Maklouf from Tunisia, Emilio Rodriguez Perorat from Argentina, and Andrea Piris from Paraguay. Then we're going to have a roundtable about road safety with our speakers, plus Marcelo Pizurno from Paraguay and Suleiman Osiman from Burkina Faso. And then we're going to have a break and session number 4 about technical solutions for paved and unpaved rural roads, with presentation by Robustiano Pineda and Engineer Gomez from Paraguay, François Chignon from France, and Bernardino Capra from Argentina, and Ernesto Barrera from Chile. You can take a look at the agenda from the PIARC's webpage, and I think it's going to be shared in the chat so that you can download it from there. A couple of comments before we start. Please write your name this way, your last name and the country, last name and country, to exchange information in case you want to have a private message with someone. Anybody who's not a speaker, please turn off your camera and your microphone. And you may enter your questions through the chat to be answered at the end in the Q&A. Please say you're asking a question to one of the speakers, so mention the speaker in your question. You can select the language you want to hear. We are going to have Spanish, French, and English. You can select the language you want to hear at the bottom of the screen. And the seminar is going to be recorded so that then it's going to be shared by PIARC. So with that, Andrea, I don't know if you want an opening word before we start the session. I just want to welcome everybody who's attending today. Thank you, Miguel, and all of the organizers. And we can start whenever you please.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So I think Imen is going to do her presentation in English.
Imen, do you want to share your screen or I share your presentation in the screen? Okay. Voici. You can start when you want, Imen, please. Imen is our French-speaking secretary of the PIARC International Committee on Rural Roads. Imen, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here among you. With a great pleasure, to talk about road safety. And in particular about gender inclusion in road safety. Can you, Miguel, share your screen, please? Presentation.
Yes.
So, I'm Miguel Maklouf. I'm a civil engineer with 20 years experience in road engineering design, and also have experience in road safety audits in many projects, urban and rural projects. Okay, just give me a moment. This. Okay, so let's start. So safe roads for all, and in particular, we need safe roads for rural women. Next, please. So through this presentation, I will go rapidly after an introduction to road safety in rural areas, problems and concerns. Then rural women and road safety concerns. In part 4, I will talk about road safety and gender inclusion, why we need to talk about gender in road safety. Then we will move to how to make roads safe for rural women. And finally, we will conclude. Next, please. So every day, almost 3,700 people are killed globally in crashes involving cars, buses, motorcycles, bicycles, trucks, or pedestrians. More than half of those killed are pedestrians, motorcyclists, or cyclists. Each year, 1.35 million people are killed on roadways around the world. This is why the United Nations set in place Sustainable Development Goals, which contain global targets on both road safety and inclusive infrastructure. Next, please. So the SDG 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure. Target 9.1, develop quality, reliable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure, including regional and trans-border infrastructure to support economic development and human well-being with a focus on affordable and equitable access for all. SDG 10, reduced inequalities. Target 10.2, by 2030, empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion for all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic or other states. SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. Target 11.2, by 2030, provide access to safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport system for all, improving the road safety, notably by expanding public transport with special attention to the needs of those in vulnerable situations, women, children, persons with disabilities, and other persons. Next, please. So, let's talk about road safety in rural areas. Yesterday, we saw many figures of rural roads from Mexico, from Paraguay, Costa Rica, Burkina Faso, Argentina, and so on. So rural roads can be paved or unpaved. They can have a smooth, wide, well-maintained surface with wide shoulder. But major of rural roads are unpaved, mainly in low middle-income countries. In general, rural roads are potholed or washboard surface where vehicle may slide out of control. Rural roads has intersection not well designed. Also, they have poor quality aggregate, which can lead to excessive dust and obscure the driver view. Next, please. So this is in general the characteristic or the common figure of rural roads: narrow lanes and shoulders, small horizontal and vertical curves, limited passing, stopping, and horizontal side distance, limited side distance at intersection, frequent roadside obstacles, lack of clear roadside recovery area, and minimal signing and lack of drainage. Next, please. So in addition, what we saw yesterday, this is other photos from real rural roads. This is from Gabon. Next, please. This is from Tunisia. But you can see nice rural roads in the United States and in France. Next, please. So rural areas continue to have a higher crash and traffic fatality rate compared to urban areas. The number of deaths occur on rural roads with fatality are at a rate nearly 3 times higher than on non-rural roads. More than 75,000 people are killed each year on rural roads in OECD countries, more than 60% of road fatalities. So safety is vital in rural areas. Studies show that insecure transport facilities and infrastructure constrain women's lives by limiting their access to education and social services. So without safe and secure travel options, women simply can't take advantage of economic and social opportunities. Next, please. Next, Miguel, please. So women and men have different mobility patterns, and studies show they travel differently. And you can see in the figure that in the red, the female traveling per region in sub-Saharan Africa. So this is the kilometer per person per year, and in blue the male kilometers. And you can see that the effort carrying by women are 3 times higher than men. Next, please. So there are differences in women mobility, accessibility, and safety needs relative to men. Women are overworked with domestic work, and their labor may not easily be transferable to construction work. Women in agriculture work and undertake activities away from the classified roads. Limited access to transport infrastructure affects education and health outcomes. So there is an empirical evidence linking girls, school enrollment, and access to safe transport services and transport spaces. In many societies, it is culturally unacceptable for women to ride bicycle. Construction site, if left unaddressed, can trigger even sexual and gender-based violence. Next, please. So let's talk about rural women and road safety. So women tend to make more stops when using a car, and they rely on public transport more than men do. Women may avoid cycling in fear of danger on the road. So far, there is fragmented evidence on the behavior aspects and social pattern of road user disaggregated by gender. Next, please. Women is considered part of vulnerable road user, with pedestrian, cyclists, and motorcyclists account for more than half of the global road crash fatalities. Road infrastructure in many countries worldwide, and in particular in low middle income countries, is still designed without consideration of vulnerable road user, prioritizing cars. Developing countries have the highest proportion of fatalities for vulnerable road user, as shown in the next figure. Next, please. So in this figure, you can see the distribution of deaths by road user type in WHO region. 40% pedestrian of the fatalities in Africa. Cyclists constitute 6% in the Western Pacific, while motorized 2 to 3-wheeled constitute 44% in Southeast Asia. You can see that your region is not represented because there is a lack of data. Next, please. So according to research, women are also particularly vulnerable to injury and fatality on unsafe roads, as they are often traveling by foot or are passive passengers in the vehicle rather than driving the vehicle themselves. Therefore, they are more exposed to danger as compared to women in high-income countries. Next, please. %47% more likely to be injured from road crashes, both according to United States research. Women are 17 times more likely than men to be killed in a road crash. Next, please. So this is why we need to mainstream gender in road safety. According to research, 730 million women currently make their living in the informal economy with limited access to social protection, public services, and infrastructure that could increase their productivity and income security. 1 in 3 women are likely to face violence in their lifetime, yet public service, urban planning, and transport systems are rarely planned with women's safety mobility in mind. Next, please. Road design has been mostly gender blind. This means that it largely ignores the specific mobility patterns of women and men derived from traditional gender roles. Deeper engagement of women to help identify other relevant issues that are often silenced or ignored, such as gender-based violence and employment barriers. In Africa, road engineering has traditionally prioritized vehicle speed without considering community behavior. This approach has given little consideration to pedestrian and other vulnerable road users, many of whom tend to be low-income women. Next, please. So mobility for everyone requires diverse perspective, and we can all benefit from diverse perspective on mobility. To create inclusive offers, we need user-centered mobility planning based on collected data. It is time to put women at the center of road design. Design for people, not for cars, and make roads more sustainable and gender inclusive. Next, please. But how can make road safe from gender perspective? Mobility for everyone requires diverse perspective, and we can all benefit from diverse perspective. And we can also achieve this when we integrate diversity among all stakeholders in all road project cycle. And you can see in the photo here how women can be integrated even in road construction projects. Next, please. How to make roads safe for rural women. Needs of women and girls must be integrated into road design to reflect mobility needs and concerns of local community. This leads to safer, more reliable rural mobility in infrastructure. Women's concern about the risk of assault, for instance, can be sorted out with street lighting and clear pedestrian paths, sidewalks to the road, lower speed limits around market, village, schools, which particularly benefits women. Sorry. Next, please. So, in that context, there are simple and affordable design improvements can make roads significantly safer and bring important benefits such as street lights, road signs, road marking, crash barrier, speed bumps, removal of obstruction at side, pedestrian facilities. Next, please. So to conclude, rural roads become safe and inclusive when gender mainstreaming is considered in the design and implementation of safe mobility strategies. Also, when design transport infrastructure take into consideration women's and vulnerable road users' needs. Also, when dedicate infrastructure for cycling and walking, which present an attractive, safe alternative mode of travel for women for short and medium distance. And also public transport infrastructure becomes safe and inclusive, taking into account women's need. Next, please. And finally, to make roads safe or safer and more accessible for everyone, both women and men are needed infrastructures in order to improve road safety. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, ingeniera.
Thank you very much, Iman Maklouf from Tunisia. Thank you very much. Your presentation was very interesting. Now I'm going to introduce Engineer Juan Emilio Rodriguez Perrotat. He is an international consultant. He is from Argentina. He has been traveling around, so I don't know where he is right now, but welcome, engineer. We are looking forward to your presentation. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Andrea, for that introduction. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this event. And thank you to Miguel from PIARC. It's an honor for me to share my experience. I have almost 30 years of experience in this topics. And the idea of my presentation is to show the practical approach of road safety in rural roads that, at least in Latin America, which are the examples that I've brought from different countries, is an important percent, a considerable percentage of the network, and it has to do, it's very linked to the amount of accidents. So it's telling me that I cannot share my screen. So I don't know if you want to enable that or if you want to share the presentation. Now you should be able to. Let me see. Let me see, and I'm going to make sure that I'm sharing my screen. There you should be able to see the screen, right? We see it perfectly. Thank you, Miguel. Okay, so let's get started. So Iman has already talked about it. This is a worldwide issue. It's a silent pandemic. Sometimes we don't notice it because, you know, individual accidents happen, but it happens every year. And according to recent report, we could save by PAHO, we could save around or about more than 150,000 lives if we had a better or safer system. And Iman already also mentioned that we have a plan by the WHO and United Nations. It's the second decade of action for road safety. And here you can see that we have different actions that we can take to achieve a safe road system, which is our goal or what we want to achieve, and to reduce the number of victims. And according to this safer system, one of the axes that is in green is related to having or creating safe infrastructure. And in order to do this, we need to have the necessary resources that are in red. We need to have regulatory frameworks that contemplate design. Also, what Iman mentioned, we need to bring in technology and have gender into account and make sure that local capabilities are focused in low and middle income countries, which in Latin America, we still have some weaknesses and aspects to improve. And this work has to be carried out jointly. The institutions responsible for roads that are linked to the government need to work together with civil society, which are the main stakeholders, and also road associations that promote road improvement, the private sector, different financing entities, multilateral financing entities that are active in Latin America, as I imagine in other parts of the world as well, that promote improvement of roads. And progress has been made in different countries around the region by contributing to the strengthening of the roads. And the United Nations is always supporting the improvement of roads here. This is the situation in America. In the Americas, we are far behind in comparison to leading countries when it comes to the amount or the mortality rate per number of inhabitants. And in this diagram, you can see all the different countries, and I'm sure that all the participants will be able to find their country there. And we still have a long way to go and a great opportunity to improve these figures. Some countries have made considerable progress. It's not that we're starting from scratch, but I think there are some aspects that we can improve. So let's see what constitutes a safe system, because when we start to consider how we should design or build or preserve rural roads, we should also apply this approach throughout all the stages. So first, we have to make sure that no one has the chance or the possibility to die in our roads, because according to this approach, our work or job as professionals at all stages of the process, that approach may change, because we not only have to worry about the alignment or soil or road characteristics, but we also need to care about who are going to be the users of the roads, and we need to anticipate what we don't want to happen. So we also need to accept that we have limited capacity to tolerate collision shocks. So we need to control and moderate speed. That is an important aspect. And we can no longer say that users need to comply with certain regulations or rules. We are also responsible for providing a safe road networks. We are responsible for making our roads safe for all users. So according to this approach, all parts need to be strong together, independently of their role or participation in accidents happening. And it's important that as a system, it works in a safe way. And as you can see here on the right, infrastructure plays a crucial role. So following the US mission, we focus on the fact or the principle that our roads have to take care of life. We have to accept that we make mistakes, and our roads have to protect us even when we make mistakes. So as I said, we are vulnerable. So infrastructure has to make sure that the consequences are not serious. For instance, with adequate or appropriate contention measurements. And I think that we have to stop thinking about the aftermath of the accident and thinking how we can solve it, but anticipating that accident and think what are the possible steps that we can take so as to be proactive and prevent life losses. And also something else is that redundancy is key. I hope that our system can protect our users in every way possible. And the message that we convey by means of the design, the alignment characteristics, all the protection systems that we implement are redundant so as to protect the lives of all the users of those roads. That, as Iman said, in most cases are vulnerable users. So it's important to have functional classifications. All our countries have a hierarchy and functions established for the roads, and we need to know what is the performance of the roads from a road safety perspective for the users that are going to be driving on those roads. So it's important that we review and constantly update all the regulations and the rules associated to our rural roads so that they can be as safe and updated as possible. Just to give you an overview of this topic, because I know that this will be dealt with in other talks, I think these concepts are applicable to all roads. Maybe they are more associated to main roads, but that's no reason to leave them aside when it comes to rural roads, because they are important. So consistency in alignment, predictability, all of that is essential. If I have outliers in the road, then it is possible that I will have a problem there, even if we're talking about rural roads. We also need to have adequate or appropriate signaling, because we need to let our users know where there are critical risk points, as curves or low visibility points. We need to be as clear as possible so that our designs are as safe as possible for our rural roads. We need to protect risks or ensure that we have risk protection, because most of our rural roads are in mountain areas, near the Andes mountain range, and we see that in most of these roads there are, for instance, lighting systems. We have, and also electricity networks, and they are all dangerous elements for our users. Eamon also talked about dust, which is also an important element. And as you can see in the image to the right, that may cause some risky situations, because the users that are behind that car may not have good visibility. So that is in itself creating a risky situation. And I think this experience or this thing happens in all the countries. The conditions of the environment may also be affected by dust. In Argentina, here in the south, aside from the safety aspect, our fruit crops were also affected by the dust that was produced or raised by these cars. And also in terms of design, it's important to take into account the width and the alignment. And when we analyze all the traffic accidents records that have happened in rural roads, that is one of the reasons why those accidents have happened. And as Iman mentioned, we not only have to take rural roads into account when it comes to heavy load or heavy good vehicles, because in some cases, this is the only way that children can access school or that families can go to work. And in some places, the characteristics of a road in terms of the width and the surface and the alignment are so harsh that one can only access those roads by using motorcycles. So we have to take into account as many types of users as possible when it comes to analyzing the characteristics for a specific road. And of course, access to transport. As Iman said, equality of opportunities also has to do with people having the same possibility and an equal possibility to access their schools, their workplace, and in many places in our region, for instance, bus transportation networks are not adequate, and they do not allow people to access school or the workplace, and that limits their opportunities. In some places, they have a high population density, and as such, the roads also need to be in a condition to sustain that density. For instance, if there is a swamp or any kind of obstacle, that will also prevent users from reaching their destination. And that is why we have to seriously consider improving our roads so as to prevent the situations that we've been talking about. And here you have some examples from the countries in Latin America, examples or situations that I was involved in. Here we were considering a cross-sectional approach, and we're talking about a road where we have cattle vehicles, cattle transportation vehicles, and what happened was that width were not adequate, especially, for instance, if transportation would take place at night, dimensions were not adequate. And this also was made worse by the side slopes. Here is another example that you can find in any kind of road safety manual regarding the safe side slopes. This is here you have a picture of something that actually happened because this appropriate conditions were not taken into account in a rural road, and there was also a ditch that was not properly signalized. And these things happen, these things take place not only in our region, I think everywhere in the world. And not only do we have or do we create a risk for life, but also a possibility of damaging the goods and the loads. So here we have an opportunity to improve our roads and prevent these situations from happening. Eamon also talked about this, that in many cases, this is the only way that rural populations can go from one place to the other. These are some images from countries in Latin America. Some people walk along the sideways and the side slopes, and in some cases they are paved roads, but in other cases they aren't. And sometimes they don't consider, they not take into account that people may use those side slopes. So there is a higher risk of being run over, for instance, especially during the night. We need to work with people because people not always wear the most appropriate clothing or walk in the safest way possible. So we have to be proactive, and by means of our designs, we need to reduce the possibility of these accidents happening. And it is also true that in many places, this is another project that I took part in Latin America. It's an indigenous community. There was a rural road that was in the process of being improved. And we had to take into account that aside from motorcycles or vehicles or bicycles, we would also have people riding horses. So we had to consider if those side slopes or the surfaces were appropriate for riding horses. There are also animals on the run that may be native or wild animals, or that may belong to some cattle farms. We have to take all of these aspects into account, the risk level that this, or the risk that these animals pose, especially at night, for instance. And in fact, in Argentina, unfortunately, we've had this kind of situations happen. And another aspect that it's important to take into account, I'm not going to delve deep into this topic because according to my understanding, you're going to talk about it in another session. It's important that we take into account all kinds of vehicles, because if we're going to have heavy goods vehicles or trailers driving on our roads, especially in productive areas where we have cattle that need to be transported, or coffee beans, or bananas, or the different produces that are produced in our areas. We need to take into account these aspects. This is another situation. The two on the left are examples of roads here in the region. As you can see, there are no signals, and the signals that we find is in the picture below, probably due to the design characteristics, the level of signage and level of visibility. A very serious traffic accident may happen. One is a rural road and the other one is a main road. So I think that, as I am a road engineer as well, so I say this as a reminder to myself as well, is that we need to make sure that we pay more careful attention to this design so as to take a proactive role and make roads more safer. I don't know if we're eventually going to reach a situation as the one depicted in the second picture, but it's something that we should strive towards. Another situation that has also led to traffic accidents has to do with the cross-sectional area of bridges, where we maybe do not have good visibility, and we also can't see if another vehicle is coming in the opposite way. And this situation is made even worse if we are not driving during the day, but at night. And if also we have people walking on the bridge, then we are adding more and more factors that can lead to a traffic accident. Eventually, we should get a situation like the one on the right-hand side. And this is another example. These are all examples from countries of here in Latin America. And we have to take into account that many rural schools have been established in rural areas. And in one case, one of the roads is paved, and we have an area for pedestrians to walk on or to cross the street. What we can see is that maybe it's not in the best way, in the best place possible, because it is right after a curve. And neither do we have any kind of signaling for speed, for reducing speed. And if we also add to that there may be dust, then that may reduce visibility and lead to an accident. And we can all work together to get safer solutions. The one that you can see in the footprint in black is one that we used in Argentina a few years ago in a rural school in the Patagonia. It was a rural road. We decided to change the alignment, create safe spaces for children, school children to cross, with traffic lights that were activated when the children wanted to cross the road. And of course, all the characteristics of the road will also affect the design. And we have to adapt the solutions to the characteristics of the road. Emilio, the presentation was very interesting, but we're running out of time. So as I said, there are a set of sources that you can resort to. One is the Road Safety Manual by PIARC. You can find it on the website, and it has different solutions according to the type of road that you're dealing with. And I'm sure you will be able to get a lot of great ideas from that. And as I said at the beginning, we've made a lot of progress, but we still have some challenges ahead. And it's our responsibility. It's in the hands of us, it's in our hands, those of the road the people in charge of roads to make sure that no more lives are lost. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Juan Emilio, por esta excelente presentación, como nos tienes siempre acostumbrados.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And if there are questions for Juan Emilio and Imen, please put them in the chat box. And now we're going to have our third presentation in this session, where we're talking about road safety and gender inclusion. And now we're going to have Andrea Piri's presentation. She is an expert in gender issues. She works with the Paraguayan section of roads and with PIARC. She is in the PIARC communication department. So Andrea, you have the floor.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todos.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, everybody.
¿Se me escucha
I'm
bien?
going to share this with you. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you and we see your presentation.
Bueno, mi tema es el tema del
Okay,
género.
my topic for today is inclusion of women in non-traditional jobs and rural road improvement in Paraguay.
Poner el modo presentación. Ahí se ve como presentación, ¿no?
Sí,
Okay.
pantalla completa.
Bueno, yo soy Andrea Peris. Estoy como
So
coordinadora
I'm Andrea Peris. I'm the communications coordinator for the Paraguayan Association of Roads, and I'm part of the PR communications department since 2019. Let me tell you about the content of my presentation. I'm going to talk about the key people who provided information for this presentation, the background, the location of the project, and the sample, the general and specific objectives of our pilot project, the diagnostic stages, the design implementation stages for the pilot plan. And then I have a short video that I'm going to share with you. And also I'm going to share the results plus challenges and opportunities that have to do with this pilot plan, the experiences and testimonials. It's very important for me to talk to you about these people that I mentioned here, because they helped me a lot with the information, and I'm just the spokesperson for this group. I'm referring to Christian Lescano from the local road division in the Ministry of Public Works, Alejandra Caldo from the IDB, as well as Martin Sosa, also from the IDB, Ana Farias from the GSA, and she is in the Special Projects Unit in the IDB, plus Sara Dominguez in the ECATEF, in the Special Projects Unit in the IDB and the local road unit. Here's some background information. According to information from 2016, the job participation of women in Paraguay in the regional context reached 55.8% versus 54.3% regionally. However, it's lower than the male job participation, which at the time of this pilot plan was 85.8%. In this graph, you can see the gaps. For example, in the construction industry, women participation only reached 2% versus 98% for male participation. And as you can see, in construction, there were very few women. This was in 2015, and the latest survey had to do with a research by the IDB in 2014. Let me tell you also that 37% of women at that time did not have their own income versus 19.6% of men in those conditions. In the rural areas, the proportion of women without an income reached 42.4%. These figures are really significant because they show what the situation looked like at that time when we started with the pilot plan. Income for rural women only reached 62.1% compared to male income, and women in rural areas made 53.1% compared to what women in urban areas made, and especially poor women in rural areas only got 27.6% compared with urban income. Now, let me tell you about the location of our project and the sample. We have Paraguay, which is one country in South America, as you know. Paraguay is the heart of South America, and this green map is the eastern side of Paraguay. The main characteristics uh, of this region made it possible to choose it as the PRL 1084 program by the IDB. So group one in this project had 6 regions, and then you have the blue lines showing the departments in Paraguay, Cazapata, Caguazú, and San Pedro, which constitute 3 departments with the highest incidence of poverty in the eastern part of Paraguay. Here we can see some of the parts and the stages in the project. These 3 departments are the ones that I just mentioned in group 1, Caguazú, Cazapá, and San Pedro, and the other 2 are part of group 2, and that amounted to almost 400 kilometers. To give you an idea of what the project was about, this is a scale project that was implemented bringing new ideas referring to inclusion of women in non-traditional jobs. And it's important for me to mention the general objective, which has to do with fostering participation of women in non-traditional jobs, especially construction of roads and maintenance of rural roads in Paraguay. And among the specific objectives, the first one is to generate knowledge and increase participation of women in non-traditional jobs, meaning non-traditional jobs generated because of the construction of rural roads through funding that enabled training also through the IDB, and also establish specific strategies for to raise awareness and debunk myths that have to do with gender stereotypes that were prevailing at the time regarding the division of roles. In 2015, we had the preparation and diagnostic stage in order to um, assess the value chain of the transportation sector with a gender perspective, taking into account different organizations like the Ministry of Public Works, constructing companies, different participants and stakeholders and workers. If you take a look at this, 14% of the inspection companies had women, and in the campsites where the work was organized for implementation had no women because they were not prepared for women. There were activities that were traditionally not for women, where women were trained, like use of different machinery, hydraulic excavators, etc. And so there were training courses for this topography and soil lab work because there was only 4% of women working in those areas. Here we show the interaction in this strategic alliance, which is a PPP project. It's a strategic alliance from the public and private sector with the participation of the Ministry of Public Works and the IDB. And here you can see the timeline and the different stages of the project. We started with a pre-project to uh, make sure that we were on the same page, and we studied feasibility in the way in which this was going to be organized with the business sector. And then we went to the awardees, the companies that were going to build, so as to make sure that this design was um, fostering the participation of all of the stakeholders, and that was the way in which we got to our goal. So that was the stage that included design and implementation of the pilot project, where we included the results of the diagnosis. We implemented the regional best practices. There were cross-sectional teams with consultants and specialists from the IDB, external consultants from the Ministry of Public Works, the Division of Rural Roads, and engineers, among other key stakeholders. And we prepared the specifications with the conditions for uh, what was needed for the project, including some of the aspects that are mentioned here. For example, number one was a specialist with a gender perspective for hiring personnel. And this is a very important point because uh, these people were responsible for making those uh, worksite camps more adequate for women, with areas that were specifically developed for gender equality and women inclusion, and also penalties for workers that would not comply with the rules and standards that were established. In the specifications, there were there was training for raising awareness regarding gender issues, especially for the workers that were living in those campsites. Another thing that was included in the specification was to have workshops, training workshops for topics that had to do with gender equality, handling of heavy duty machinery, labs, worksite security and safety. And there were internships with pay for women who had already received training to make sure that gender inclusion was made possible. And the specifications also included a gender plan at the end of these internships and at the end of the works. I would like for you to watch this video that was prepared by the IDB and the Ministry of Public Works, which were the main sources helping us preparing this presentation. This is a video that compiles some testimonials for you to appreciate what the pilot plan meant. This is an improvement program for local roads. One of the women says, I love doing everything that has to do with heavy machinery, and I have always liked machines since I was a little kid. I am not afraid. I want to go onto this machine on a daily basis. On the first few days, people were scared, especially men around me, because they saw a woman in this huge machine, but they got used to it because we started working together. Regarding the gender strategies to increase participation in non-traditional jobs by women, he says it's important in a road project. There are many jobs, and it's not complicated. It's just an issue of wanting it to happen. Training of participants was done through a professional promotion alliance. Women who were selected had a 5-month internship, and one of them says, this was a very enriching experience for me because I think few of my colleagues have this kind of opportunity to work in this kind of project. We need to tell the society that women are capable of doing traditional things and non-traditional things. We can stay home and take care of the children, but we can work outside the house too. He says, it's different if you see the group of your usual colleagues, but when you share with women, it's a different way, it's a different motivation. I want them to be proud of me. I want them to say I was part of this in the future and be proud of me. I started working doing curtains, and now I can do everything that men can do, and I'm proud of myself. Why cannot I handle this kind of tractor? Of course, I could do that too, and I'm going to show that to my family and to everybody.
Espero les haya gustado.
I hope you like that video. Now, to refer to the results of the execution of the pilot plan regarding the inclusion of women in non-traditional jobs, these metrics were taken in November 2017, and these were the companies working at that time. These were the first companies participating in the pilot plan. In total, it was 167 men and women in the project. Out of those, 37% were women and men were 63%. There were 13 courses with official certificates to launch the, the project, and we had 167 people.
We also have another survey that was done in 2018, 2019, and 152 people were surveyed. And when we compare it to the previous one, we went from 167 people in total out of which 61 were women. And in 2018-2019, out of 152 people, 84 were women. So the percentage went up to 55%. And we surveyed data until June 2022, serving these companies when it comes to rural roads. And out of 226 people, 48% were women. So out of 226 people, 109 were women. And as a result of this pilot project, we managed to implement the pilot plan to include women in non-traditional jobs. We widened the offer for women trained in road work. We fulfilled or complied with all the indicators when it came to the amount of the number of courses, the hours, the number of people trained. We reached our objectives, and we also used this experience and applied it to other programs to improve rural roads. We also tried to foster skills development, to promote equal opportunities between men and women, to include this project of sustainable development in our governments and different local municipalities. We also worked with this idea of equal opportunities in all trainings and in different business and training camps. We also made broadcasts on TV. And regarding the challenges for the Ministry of Public Works, we have to improve the articulation with other public and private institutions so as to carry out this training, this technical training that was key to achieving all of these, and also the internal challenges that we needed to analyze all the foundational worksheets, all the conditions that were faced by the contracting companies so as to lower risks as much as possible. And when it comes to the opportunities, we foster entrepreneurship. We created new courses where women had the chance to participate. Also, stakeholders and agents from different sectors took part in this, and they made all of these changes that I talked about, like implementing bathrooms. And this is the life experience of a woman called Ashesa Lopez, who lives in Casapa in Paraguay. And in this region, many roads are made of dirt, and that makes it difficult for people to move around from one place to the other, especially in rainy days. And nonetheless, she says that the harder the road, or the harder it is to transit that road, the better, because she has to face this harder challenges. And for her, it was incredible to know that her parents listened to her speech on the radio. They were even happier than her. And in the training, she was taught to use or handle a hydraulic excavator. And at first, they experienced a simulation, but they learned to handle it. And at first, she said, "What the heck is this?" But then she said, "I have to do it, because if not, I'm never going to improve and be better." And this is an opportunity that in Guarani means oro kui, and it's like a golden opportunity, a one-time opportunity. And after 3 weeks of training, Ayesa and all her partners are already handling real excavators. And she was the first one to try it, and she felt the machinery move. She was shocked at first because everything seemed really hard at first, but then she was able to handle it thanks to a great and patient trainer and instructor. And these are two testimonials from two people that were key in implementing this. Cristian Lescano, I talked about him at the beginning, that he is a coordinator for the Neighboring Roads project for the ministry. And he said that through this training, the program seeks to improve people's quality of life by creating development opportunities. And with this initiative, they are promoting a positive social impact on rural areas, which at the same time contributes to economic growth of vulnerable populations. And Florencia Raes, who is a representative of UN Women in Paraguay, also highlights how important it is to take action to empower women. And she said, sometimes people think that it's hard to work on equal terms in projects like this, but we've had successful experiences that show us that it is possible, and we can challenge this stereotype so that no one is left behind. Andrea, we are running out of time. It's been excellent, but if you can please conclude the presentation. Yes, this is the last slide. So by analyzing the experience that we've had with this program, we realized that it was key to take into account all the opportunities and the improvements made in rural roads, and all the programs that were part of the development projects in Paraguay. This was key for all the improvement and pavimentation or paving projects in Paraguay. And in Paraguay, we are also considering programs where we can incorporate women as labor and different design projects to improve rural roads. And of course, this context varies according the country, but if we take a look at the records, and by systematizing all of these, we were able to replicate this experience in other countries. So I thank everyone that I mentioned at the beginning, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. There you have all my contact information if you want to reach out to me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. I'm open to any kind of question. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrea, for that excellent presentation. I think we've listened to 3 amazing presentations in the first part of today's session on road safety and gender inclusion. We're going to devote the 10 minutes that we have left to a Q&A session. There are some questions on the chat, but we'll try also to answer some other questions. So Imen, Juan, and Andre, if you could please turn on your cameras to take part in the Q&A session. I'm going to read the first question, which is addressed to Imen. It's in French. So, Imen, this is a question from Suleiman from Burkina Faso. And it says, according to you, how can we take into account women's safety from the beginning of road development? That is a very good question, Suleiman. And you made me think about the past, because when I was a child, I lived in a rural area. And I remember that my mom walked me to school. And there was no place for us to walk. And I remember that once I got to school, I was full of dust. And that was something essential for women. And I think we have to think about this from the point of, from the very beginning, from the perspective of the design, because I remember that rural women got up very early to pick up olives at the vineyards, and they did it fast so that they could get there before it got dark, because there was a lack of lighting. So we have to take all of this into account. The issue of lighting is essential for roads, but this does not mean that we have to leave other things aside, such as, for instance, methods to reduce speed.
Muchas gracias, Imen.
Thank you very much, Imen. And thank you very much for keeping your answers short. The idea is that you answer in 1 or 2 minutes, if possible. The next question is for Juan Emilio. It's from Ecuador. It's Cesar Ruiz, who is a great PR collaborator. It's a pleasure to have you here. And it says the following: in Ecuador, rural roads, or the government is not in charge of rural roads through the Ministry of Public Works. It is in charge of local governments, which have a limited budget. So how do you think that government can support these organizations to improve rural roads and the production cycles of our countries, which is one of the issues that we are facing now? Juan Emilio, if you can answer in 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you, Cesar, for that question, even though I don't think I'll be able to answer it in 1 to 2 minutes. Yes, Ecuador is undergoing a very critical situation regarding this topic. I think rural roads are strategic for the production of any country. Ecuador is not the exception. I think that here we have to focus, as I mentioned in my presentation, that some regions are experiencing more difficulties due to the population density, but there are opportunities to improve the situation. In terms of financing, I think there is a specific fund that we can resort to improve roads in these areas. And according to my understanding, there are also different budget options that are given to local governments. But I think this applies to all countries, and it's important to articulate our job between the local government and the national government so that all the roads make up a network that adequately links production to shipment and delivery, and to make sure that all the points of contact do not turn into risk points. And financing is not easy. It's not easy to get financing, but we need to continue working together to achieve better results. Thank you very much, Juan Emilio. The next question is for Andrea Pérez. It's from Carlos, and it says the following: according to that pilot plan that was implemented, do you think that including women in this area is something that is going on the right track? Or do you think that we still have a long way to go to get our desired situation according to the statistics and different surveys? Can you see my image here? Because I'm not seeing myself. Okay, great. So I do believe that we still have a long way to go, but I think we've managed to gain a lot of ground because we are finding women in more and more sectors and spaces here. And I'm not only talking about the experience in Paraguay, but in the private sector, it's also important to highlight that women are gaining ground. Women have reached executive positions in companies. There are a lot of offices and agencies that are of which women are in charge. And it would be, we don't have time to talk about the surveys done by the IBD, but as a general conclusion, we've made a lot of progress. So we have one more question for each speaker because we are running out of time. The next question is for Imen.
elle dit ainsi. Peux-tu nous dire comment est géré l'aspect genre en Tunisie? Si on sort du cadre homme-femme,
How is the issue of gender addressed in Tunisia? So gender integration in general. If I understood the question correctly, yes, I think that if we go beyond the framework of considering men and women, well, Tunisia has made a lot of progress in terms of gender. And women is being increasingly valued and appreciated, and they are given positions of power and decision-making positions so that they can have more opportunities or as many opportunities as men. So women in Tunisia have made a lot of progress, but of course, there's still a long way to go.
Muchas gracias, Imen. Vamos a por otra
Thank you
pregunta.
very much, Imen. Let's go with the next question to Juan Emilio from Fernando Paniagua from Paraguay. And it says the following: if you had to give it a score to the road safety characteristics in Argentina, what would the score be, and what do you think is better, the Paraguayan or the Argentinian situation? Well, both questions are quite complex because it has to do with road management. I think that, as it happens in any country, there are some rural roads that are in good condition, and there are others that are in terrible condition. So to give it a general score, I think that's not possible, because we should have the information of what's going on in every region or every province. When it comes to Argentina, the roads are in charge of each province or even in charge of each municipality. And this is maybe not something that happens only in Argentina, but in all countries around the world. There are roads that do not have enough resources. So we can only expect the scores to not be that high. And based on what we were talking, Ecuador is also, this also happens in Ecuador. And sometimes the possibility that people have to use these roads are low in terms of safety. And that's why maybe the scores will not be that high, because the roads do not have a safe alignment. The widths do not take into account different vehicles or different methods of protection. I do not want to give them a score, but I do believe that when it comes to most rural roads, there is a huge opportunity to improve the situation so that we can maybe not reach 5, because that would be ambitious, but safer scores. Thank you very much, Juan Emilio. We have one last question, because as you know, we're running out of time for the roundtable. This question goes to Andrea from Fernando Paniagua and says, what are the things that we have missing to continue empowering gender equality in women in Paraguay? Thank you. So I think that one key issue is to create more and more opportunities in every situation possible. We need to bring these women inclusion projects onto the table. For many other projects and plans, and we need to replicate this experience and other projects, not only when it comes to neighboring roads, but also in any kind of public works and road works. And this could also be used as an incentive for the business sector. so as to create more opportunities for women. Thank you very much, Andrea. And thank you very much to the three speakers that we've listened to in this session. An excellent session on road safety and gender inclusion in rural roads. We are going to move to the roundtable now.
Okay, we're going to have Engineer Raúl Quintero from Argentina, Engineer Marcelo Pisurno from the Paraguayan Association of Roads. We also have Juan Emilio from the previous session. We have Imam Maklov from Tunisia, Suleiman Osiman, who was with us yesterday from Burkina Faso. He's the president of the International Technical Committee 2.2 in PIARC. And Miguel Casoflores is going to moderate this roundtable. He is the technical director of PIARC. Now, I think we have everybody, and if you turn on your cameras, please. We are going to start with one question to open the floor for those who did not participate today. And please don't forget to ask your questions through the chat box. I would like to ask a question to Marcelo Pisurno or Raúl Quintero. Can you mention good practices to improve road safety, especially when speeds go up in rural roads? This is a classical problem that we've had because when we are able to improve the traffic conditions, there's more speed and we need to work around that. Can you mention any practices that have worked, Marcelo? And if you want to introduce yourself before you answer the question, can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. And you're asking me about the problems that we have when we improve roadworthiness and traffic conditions in rural roads. It's a very common situation in Paraguay because initially the Ministry of Public Works tries to make economy more dynamic, and that entails enhancing and improving rural roads, but sometimes the geometrical design is not compatible with the new speeds that you can get given the surface. And so there are horizontal curves that do not have the right radius, which make it impossible to avoid the black points. And in the case of asphalt pavement, there are problems with horizontal designs and problems with the original design. The shoulder is very narrow or doesn't exist. So the ideal thing is when you develop a new geometrical design, the speeds should go to 80 kilometers per hour, but that means that you need to take into account this when you do the geometrical design for those stretches. Paraguay is seeing an increase or an improvement and growth in the infrastructure, but and that means that some stretches that were ripple or other surfaces have been paved, and the slopes have to be 1.3 as the minimum so that the shoulders can be paved. There are water runoff works that need to be done in order to improve safety indexes. In Paraguay, nowadays, we are working with very good safety controls. The ministry has specialists on safety to have debates regarding design, which is positive for all the parties. But I think that in this growth stage, which is very positive, we need to take into account lighting, crossroads, vertical signaling. As part of the designs, we're also including or paying more attention to
una etapa de crecimiento muy importante,
pedestrians,
¿verdad? Y
which
todo
were
ahora notablemente.
are in a very active growth and enhancement stage, and we need to take into account safety. Thank you very much. Now, Raúl Quintero, if you could please tell us about the same aspect. Could you mention the good practices when it comes to increasing speed and having better safety conditions in rural roads? Can you hear me? Yes. Well, Argentina's reality has to do with two aspects. Regarding the main road network, we have implemented good practices in most of them, not everywhere, but especially in urban areas regarding speed. There were changes in the geometrical designs. There were treatments for urban crossroads, and even the inclusion of ITS systems in a percentage which amounts to 3% of the national network. I'm talking about road safety in Argentina, and that is focused on urban areas. But regarding rural areas, we have not seen good practices, and we have not seen the implementation of adequate policies to reduce speed, especially in rural road networks in Argentina. Thank you very much, Raúl. Now let's hear Sullivan, who has not participated in the previous session, and let's ask him the same question.
Quelles mesures pour améliorer la sécurité routière dans les routes rurales une fois qu'on a fait une intervention sur la chaussée de roulement et qu'on augmente la vitesse du trafic?
Suleiman, we're asking you the same question.
Merci bien, Miguel. Bon, il faut dire que ici au Burkina, nous avons la première spécificité, c'est que les routes rurales ici ne sont pas revêtues, comme on l'a déjà dit dans ma présentation hier. Donc, les mesures prises, c'est essentiellement les panneaux de signalisation.
Many roads are not in good conditions, so our measures have to do with vertical signaling. Vertical signaling is the measure that we took, and nowadays we do have signs to limit speed, especially in the crossroads. And apart from signage, we have a problem because in general, rural roads pose a challenge to signs because people remove them in many cases or use them for something else. So when the signage is destroyed, we try to adapt the situation and place more signs. Also, people have referred to pedestrian crossings, but I don't know how to deal with this in our situation because the road, rural roads are not very well equipped for cars because they are too narrow. We have to widen the lanes so as to make it possible for vehicles and pedestrians to coexist. And also another problem that was mentioned was the dust. This is something where we are very limited. I mean, there's not a lot we can do because during the dry season, it's impossible to deal with the dust, especially because if there's no visibility, it's very easy to have an accident. But that's my point of view regarding this. I think that we need to conduct studies regarding design, but we are not specialists when it comes to road safety. So I cannot refer to this in more detail. The engineers were proposing to have solutions that are probably the best way. Now we're going to continue in French with Imen. We are going to ask her about the importance of considering road safety from the initial stages of design. How can we integrate road safety from from scratch, from conception of the road itself in rural roads? Okay, let me make a comment about what Suleiman mentioned, and let's add the implementation of surveys and studies, because I think that's an important point. Sometimes when the roads are paved, people start going faster, and that generates other kinds of problems. So that's why the philosophy behind this has to be knowing that there's always mistakes and there's errors, but we have to be indulgent with human error. And regarding technical solutions, there are solutions to stabilize the surface, not with chemical products, but with some additives that are respectful of the environment, or it's possible to improve compacting of the platforms in unpaved roads. Maybe we can go to more detail when Francois talks about um, paving techniques. Now let me go to your question, Miguel. From the beginning of the project, from the very beginning of the project, you always have to think about road safety. There are surveys nowadays and also independent reports by auditors supervising all of the aspects that have to do with road safety, taking into consideration every step of the way. Before execution, they are already considering these factors. So that makes it easier to make changes if you start thinking about these points from the very beginning of the design. If you start including this from the very beginning or the very first stages of the project, that improves road safety. And this is a practice that is becoming more and more common. Thank you, Imen. Now I'm going to ask a question to all of the speakers, and I would ask you to please answer in 1 minute. This is from the chat box. It's a question by Rubén Darío Lomas. He's asking, what are the experiences regarding providing safety to vulnerable users? That is pedestrians, cyclists, or animal-led carts, for example, because we have limited space and the rural roads have to be shared. So what are the solutions
Gracias, Miguel.
for vulnerable users. Emilio, can you start? Yes, the province where you are, Ruben, is a low-cost solution, which is separate lanes. As was said, sometimes you can separate vulnerable users, but this is not always possible. You need to use berms or shoulders for them to move along that space. And that's the example in this Central American country. There are other solutions
De por lo menos mejorar la
or
superficie
other ways in which you can improve the surface
animal como un caballo o una persona
for circulation so that animals like horses or people or bikers or cyclists can
que se había planteado una solución
travel. In the Ecuadorian Amazonia, I saw a solution in a rural school that was around 500 meters from the population, and for children to be able to reach the school safely on a parallel track, parallel to the road, there was a pavement with stones that came from the roadworks. So I think that's a low cost solution. Yeah, I think low cost is key here. Marcelo, how can we share our roads with vulnerable users? In Paraguay, we have introduced, or we have paid a lot of attention to pedestrians, especially in urban or semi-urban areas, paying special attention to pedestrian crossroads, especially in school environments or in populated areas, because many of the rural roads also go through urban areas or urban populations. That is a very important aspect to take into account regarding safety. But this is a permanent debate. Reinforcing safety has to do with installing spaces or waiting areas for pedestrian crossing and pavements or sidewalks that lead the pedestrians so that they go along those marked sections. As I said before, we have reinforced safety thanks to approval because of the funding from the banks and the Ministry of Public Works. So I think it's one of the most common practices together with beltways. And what we're trying to do is dealing also with lighting systems, especially in pedestrian crossings, in urban or populated areas with LED systems that are fed through or that are powered through solar panels. Those are the good examples of the practices that we're implementing in Paraguay. Raúl Fernando, what can you tell us about vulnerable users? Well, I could tell you about some of the experiences that I've had in the Road Association, especially with animals that cross the road. In the case of vulnerable users, some of the measures that were most successful were to separate and have two different tracks for vulnerable users separated from the vehicle track. In Bahía Blanca, where I live, we have 5 kilometers of a semi-urban road where we used to have 3 fatalities per year. Now there's a bicycle lane, and in these last 10 years, we've had 0 fatalities. So this is low cost with simple technology, with the resources that are available in the area. And as I said before, there's another
Sí,
point that has to do with treatment of urban crossings. And regarding animals, during long weekends, for example, when it is assumed that many users of the road are going to be using a road that they are not familiar with because they are tourists, especially on Sunday afternoon when they start going back home, we start patrolling the area. So there are barriers, of course, but patrolling the area is key, especially in the places where you know that animals could be crossing the road. We were able to decrease the incidents with animals that cause crashes. We were able to drop that to by 23%.
Great, it was excellent. We're going to ask the same question to our French-speaking friends. Imena, could you suggest one proposal for vulnerable users in rural roads? Well, we have the same practices, considering what our colleagues said when it comes to bike riders. And nowadays, new things are being adopted in Tunisia. For instance, dedicated spaces for bike riders that are physically separated or painted to separate them from main traffic. And we are also implementing fences throughout the country, especially after COVID. And we're also promoting the use of bikes and encouraging people to walk, especially in urban areas. I'm not sure if we had a strategic plan before, but I think that we're on the right track to achieve that. Suleiman, any practice that you can suggest to protect vulnerable users in Burkina Faso? Yes. Thank you, Miguel. So regarding vulnerable users, we have to consolidate the issue of vertical signals to place them near schools or any kind of business or pedestrian crossings. We need to place more signals. We have signals 100 meters before the area, but we also need to place signals for vehicles to know when they are nearing pedestrian crossings, because sometimes you have children that just start running, and we need to have signage indicating the vehicles that they are approaching a pedestrian crossing. And this would also be useful to let pedestrians know. And we are also trying to place humps to make cars to force cars to slow down if they don't respect the signals. So those are measures that we have implemented so as to protect vulnerable road users. Thank you very much, Suleiman. We are approaching the end of the roundtable, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists to send a 1-minute message regarding an important aspect that they would like to highlight on rural roads, and we would appreciate it if it could be a positive or hopeful message So, Marcelo, final message for everyone attending the seminar. Well, regarding our situation here in Paraguay, we are experiencing a positive evolution or change in terms of infrastructure growth. There is before and after when it comes to the development of rural projects as well as paving projects. And many experts and specialists in the area have taken part in this. Signals are being respected. We are developing roads with urban specialists, and that is extremely positive because that increases safety. And of course, we experience the same issues in different countries. So Paraguay is experiencing a very positive growth and evolution for the development of roads in the country. So I would like to extend my greetings to all of you. Thank you very much. Raúl, a final message? Well, regarding road safety and rural roads, either paved or not, one recommendation that I would make is to resort to the good practices that we have on improving roads at a low cost. There are many studies on profitability, on amortizations, on the relationship between cost and benefit. So my recommendation for all of those listening would be to resort to those good practices that we have developed worldwide, because that is the first step to start working on safety, on road safety. Thank you. Of course, we have our road safety manual that actually states that road infrastructure is one of the most sustainable. Juan Emilio? Well, I'm going to give you a half empty, half full glass. I think all of our countries have tried to do our best to improve our roads. And as Raul said, we have to take advantage of this opportunity that we have for, on the one hand, recognize all the progress that we've made, because that's going to encourage us to move forward. And based on that experience, we also have to recognize and identify the challenges that we will face, because we are all responsible for generating safe space for all our users. So when it comes to developing roads, even though some people mentioned that we sometimes lack data, we need to know what that road is going to be used for, what are the characteristics of the place, so as to design the roads in the best way possible for them to be safe for everyone. Thank you very much, Juan Emilio. Amen. Final words to share with all the attendees. I would like to say that road safety does not concern infrastructure alone or drivers. It is a system that works together. It is a global system that involves all of these components, the drivers, the developers of infrastructure. So that's why I always highlight that it's a human world, and everything should be related to humans. And road safety is not a checklist. It is a value. It is a value that we have to uphold. We have to strive to become a model that is worth following. We have to try to continue learning. There are many details and information that we have still to learn. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Okay.
Suleiman, closing words for this roundtable. Thank you, Miguel. Well, it is a global phenomenon, and in particular in my country and in Western Africa, road safety in rural roads is important because we want to carry out a project in good faith. We want everyone to be protected, roads to be safe, but in the end, the ones who have to finance those projects think that it's too expensive because to build 1 kilometer of road requires X amount of money. So the cost is what ends up determining what those roads will be like. So the people in charge of making decisions are the ones who decide how the project is going to develop. So I think that we are on the right track, especially considering some of the policies that are being implemented. Thank you very much, Suleiman. Thank you, all the 5 participants, for taking part in this roundtable. We have some questions left. Some attendees have made some very interesting questions, but we have gone over the time and we're going to go straight to the break. One last comment. PIARC is an invaluable source where you can find the answers or possible solutions that you can implement. So it's important to gather all these experiences so that we can resort to them in the future. Thank you, Juan. Of course, here we are to share our best practices, and thank you very much for mentioning that. So if you all agree, we're going to go straight to the break, 7-minute break. We will be back at 3:35 Paraguayan time, and see you in 7 minutes.
Well, the idea is to share with our distinguished guests this experience that we had in Paraguay in connection with local road design and the inspection on those roads. I'm Engineer Robustiano Pineda. I was a member of the Public Works Ministry for many years, and that gave me the possibility of seeing the evolution of the road network in Paraguay. And currently, I'm working as a consultant, as director of fiscalization for CREMA style contracts. In the consultancy where I work, we were asked to work on the design of local roads. And as you heard yesterday, the Vice Minister of Public Works and Communications, and in some of the other presentations from Paraguay, you heard that there's a plan for paving local roads in Paraguay. We participated then in the design of one of the first sections, which is not very particular, but it has some specific features that I'm going to be referring to. The initial characteristics of the section started in General Resquín and finished in San Vicente. This is a rural area in Paraguay, in the north of Paraguay. And according to the specifications, it was almost 45 kilometers long, but in the field, it was 33 kilometers actually. The characteristics of this section is 3 kilometers of a paved road with asphalt, 6.8 with cobblestone, which is a part that comes from a previous solution that was used in Paraguay called critical site solution, which was using cobblestone or stones in areas with a slope or low points in the terrain where there were difficulties because of rainfall. And so in those parts, it was defined to have cobblestone, and then the rest, it was 35 kilometers of Ripple Road. It was 2 lanes, and the initial characteristics had to do with or can be seen in this picture. And then you have the design parameters that were established in the specifications. The minimum curve radius was 250 meters, but it was not respected according to the instructions that we received from the road department or local roads, OMPC. We respected the axis and used the existing design respecting the curves, which forced us to exceed minimum radius to have better traffic volume. And then you can see on the top the design that was adopted with a radius of 80 meters. And the one below, it's an alternative that we presented with a radius of 250 meters according to the specs. And the subsurface had to do with the design according to the design speeds. The surface was 5 centimeters of asphalt, and in the ones that were cobblestone, it was widened with a different type of stone, which was a solution adopted so that the material in the extension was the same as the existing material. There was an asphalt regularization for 45 kilograms per square meter and asphalt concrete also. The subrace for the ripple area was 15 centimeters with cement at 2% and stone and sand in a proportion of 85-15, and there was an asphalt surface of 25 centimeters. Here you can see the solutions that were adopted. The subrace or the subgrade and the pavement. One of the points that had a lot of repercussions in social networks, you can see here how the community showed their satisfaction because of these works. In that sense, the works ended with 45 kilometers of asphalt paved road, which improved the quality of life for 15,000 people, and it enabled population to access basic services. This also meant improvements in the homes adjacent to the paved road with more stores, which had a positive impact in the population. Final costs, according to the different items, amounted to $263,000 per kilometer, which is quite affordable, quite reasonable, according to the specifications and demands from the ministry. The recommendations and conclusions are that the works make a rural road, which is still local, is a paved road now, and this category is not typified in the current classification. But since it's not included in the standards, it forced us to be creative in some of the solutions. For example, the curves. The width of the lanes is also very adjusted, very tight, and it had to be reduced in some of the stretches. And there's also issues that have to do with maintenance and weight control when it comes to paving local roads, as the ministry is doing in many of the roads. But these are the open challenges that we still face. Let me show you some pictures of the works. And I want to show you that it's almost next, almost adjacent to the fences, and the right of way is really narrow. Here you can see that in each of the pictures, like you can see here that the fences are really close to the works, and you can see what happens with the curves. And with that, I finish my presentation. I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm available for questions.
Muchísimas gracias, ingeniero Robustiano Pineda, por la excelente presentación y también
Thank you very much, Robustiano Pineda, for that incredible presentation, and also for presenting within the time limits established. That was very helpful. We're now going to press on to the next presentation by François Chagnon, who is
uno de los grupos de trabajo del Comité Técnico Internacional de... Perdón, es que estoy escuchando el francés, la traducción al francés.
Sorry, I was listening to the French translation. So Francois is a leader of one of the work groups of the International Committee, and he speaks 3 languages, and I don't know in which language he's going to make the presentation, but all 3 are okay. So Francois, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Sorry, I don't speak very well Spanish. I speak very well French, but I prefer to go to English. So this is life. So we're going to start today to talk about bitumen emulsion, because this is a very well-known technique done around the world. And I think this is one of the techniques we should look at, in case for the rural roads, in order to reduce dust sometimes, and also to do the maintenance. I think constructing road is quite important, even with women. But I think the most important thing will be to do that with not to forget maintenance on the long term. Okay, so we're going to start the presentation now. Thank you, Miguel.
Sorry, Francois, you put it in your screen or I put it in my screen?
Yes, I ask you to do it.
Okay, sorry, yes, you're right.
That's okay, that's all right. No big deal.
I put it right away.
I can do that, no issues.
No, it's okay. There you go.
So on the program, you notice, they say I was working for Colas. So I was working for Colas. Colas is not Colas traduction in Spanish, okay, but that's the name of the company called Asphalt, Colas. I worked 40 years for them, and now I am a consultant for Route de France, which is the French Industry Association for France. And also I'm part of TC 2.2, and I'm in charge of the group TC 2.2.3, in charge of the techniques for unpaved and paved roads. Next, please. So we're going to talk today about what is bitumen emulsion. You know bitumen usually because I saw that you were talking about asphalt, so I guess you know bitumen, but bitumen emulsion is one of the ways to use different techniques in order to do the road maintenance and sometimes to new construction with bitumen emulsion. And the role of maintenance, I think this is very important. We talk about new construction, but I think the life of a road is for a long time, and really we need to go forever for roads. So that means maintenance should be really part of the thinking of every road owner. Next, please. So bitumen emulsion, this is oil in water. That means oil is bitumen and water will be the aqueous phase, as we said. Usually you have also water in oil, like butter or margarine, and also mayonnaise, milk, water paint, some hand creams are emulsion. So water, oil in water, oil is the bitumen, very small droplets, 5 to 10 microns, in the water solutions. When you apply the bitumen emulsion on the road, the water will evaporate and the bitumen will stay in place. Next, please. So what is the composition? I think you have maybe another one to push. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. So water is more important. Bitumen represents 40 to 70% of the bitumen emulsion. Water is part of it. We have chemicals. Usually we say surfactants between 0.2 and 2.5%, depending on the kind of emulsion you are doing. And on the left, you've got a microscopic photo of emulsion. And all the small particles are the bitumen. They are not black because this is linked to the way we took the picture. Next, please. So more important that I was talking about surfactant. That means around the micelle of bitumen, like you can see the black micelle of bitumen. The surfactant will help to give a positive, for cationic emulsion, a positive charge around the bitumen. So that means every micelle of bitumen will have a positive charge. That means the mix, the emulsion will be stable in the tank because you've got that electrostatic repulsion plus, which prevent every micelles to talk to each other. So this is the importance of emulsion. We're going to look at certain characteristics of the emulsion on the next slide, please. The good thing about emulsion compared to bitumen or to cutbacks or flux bitumen, that we can apply them at lower temperature, between 30 to 80 degrees. 30 degrees will be done for cold mix. We're able to make cold mix either for road maintenance or even for paving. We do cold mix for paving now. And 80 degrees will be mainly for surface dressings or chip seal, like they say in the US, in order to have a fast evaporation of the water. No VOCs in the air, that's quite important compared to cutbacks. Cutbacks is a 60% bitumen, 40% diesel, oil, or other things. That part will go in the air, so that there is no sense to put diesel in the air with cutbacks. A lot of countries, like Mexico, for example, decided to go directly from cutback to emulsion. That was a big switch for them, but that was a way to prevent to put VOCs in the air. In Europe, CO2 is getting more important. So every time we are looking at cold mix, this is quite important compared to hot mix because you are using less energy, and energy, that's CO2 in the air. So that's not too good. Multiple use in road construction. That's why that's quite important for emulsion. We are able to use. We'll see some 2 different applications lately. You have access to US standards or European standards as you wish, and that's quite important. That product is very well known. It's worldwide, it's between 9 to 10 million tons around the world. Do not forget the total bitumen market in the world is 100 million tons. So that means 6 to 7% of the bitumen is going to emulsion. For France, for example, 30% of the bitumen is going to emulsion. The French network is quite important. It's 1 million kilometers of paved road and 500,000 of unpaved. And on the paved road, this is kind of the common techniques we're going to see later, which is the two things we're going to see on the next slide. So what do we do with bitumen emulsion? We can use it as a tack coat. Tack coat is very important when you apply 2 or 3 layers of hot mix. It's a way to have the hot mix working together, not to be and to be glued together like the glue. I think that's the use of the tack coats. We can use also fog seal. They do that quite a lot in the US. It's a way to protect mixes, mainly at hot weather, in order to protect the oxidation of the bitumen from the mix. The other thing was used with aggregates, so surface dressings or chip seal, like in the US. We're going to look at them. Macro surfacing, which is another technique. And like I said, more and more now, and that's something we do in Europe, it's asphalt concrete bitumen emulsion, ACBE. That's a standard we have in Europe now for coal mix done with bitumen emulsion, used as repairs, but as paving, as base course. In a lot of low and medium traffic roads, we're able to reinforce the pavement with coal mix. And that's a nice way to do that with a grader. And that's a very nice technique. We're able to reprofile from 0 to 20 or 10 centimeters in order to have a nice profile of the low traffic pavement. Next, please. So I'm going to look first of all at the importance of road maintenance. You have to next, please. So this is a bit of Spanish. I found that somewhere, so just for that, but there is a bit of French also, so it's kind of difficult. If we look at the curve, you start by the green, that means green, it's a new pavement, everything is okay. Then you go to yellow, that means you didn't do too much on the maintenance, and this is not as good. And then you go to the red, that means you did do nothing, that means the road is going pretty bad, and that's pretty difficult. At every stage of that, we have techniques. You can use crack sealant, you can use chip seal, you can use a lot of products in the green and the yellow, but as soon as you are going to the red, cost of maintenance will be double or triple, or sometimes times 10s, and sometimes you have to reconstruct cold in place recycling. You can do a lot of technique in the red. So usually what we think that's important for even for rural roads, because even if the traffic is low, you have some maintenance to be done. And on paved roads, surface dressings is the most cheap technique in order to maintain the road network. And that's a good skid resistance also for safety of the users. So that's important to stay in the green in order as soon as you go to yellow or red, costs will go up, and that's not very good. Pavement are like a car, it's like a house. You have to maintain it the right way. Next, please. So this is all the different techniques. So just what I said, on the life of the pavement, going from good to pretty bad. As soon as you are, I won't go through that one, but I think that's important, to keep that in mind, that you have small techniques at the beginning, the cheap one, you have crack sealing, you have prevent the water to go through the pavement, that's quite important. Drainage on the side is important also. But I think all those different techniques, are linked to the way people are looking at road maintenance. And the big issue we have all around the world right now is road maintenance is not very interesting for political people. They can't cut ribbons. They don't see too much what's going on, but I think this is quite important for the road owners because it's a way to preserve the money is set up when you construct the road. Next, please. So two techniques, we're going to look at very quickly. The first one is surface dressings. We do that in that's a UK way, and chip seal that in the US. So we apply bitumen emulsion. You can see the bitumen emulsion on the left is brown because the emulsion didn't break yet. There is not the separation between the water and the bitumen. And on the right, we apply the aggregate on top of it. This is a very simple technique. Nothing on the structure. This is only on the surface in order to give imperviousness and to give skid resistance with the aggregates. Next, please. So this is on the right, the normal thing. You have to clean the pavement before you do that. You apply the emulsion, you apply the aggregate, you compact the whole thing. You be very careful with the safety and the signs and everything in order to have a good safety job site. We travel, we travel a lot around the world, so I think that's quite important to have a good safety on job site also. You can do single dressing, double dressing, that means a lot of different things are done linked to the kind of pavement you have to play with. A lot of documents are looking at that, what you have to do, what is the best techniques to do depending on the traffic, depending on the altitude, the weather, the climatic conditions, and everything. So this is surface dressing, the cheapest technique. We do in France around 150 million square meters of that. In Europe, it's a very well-known technique. In the US also. I don't know too much South America because I didn't work there. I work in Canada and the US, but not South, so that, sorry. But this is a very common technique and very well used around the world. Next, please. So road technique very well known. So it was low and medium traffic from seaside to mountain areas, cold places to hot places. That's pretty good. You have to adapt the emulsion, to adapt the aggregate depending on the traffic and the climatic conditions. Yes, next. Microsurfacing is a different one. Microsurfacing is a self-propelled machine with everything on it, emulsion, water, all the additives. It's a scene overlay. And like you can see on the left, you have the brown first because the emulsion didn't break yet. That's the emulsion is quite different from surface dressing. It's a very slow setting. We want the emulsion to break after the mixing, after the application on site. And then that's a nice way to do that on top of a hot mix. Usually it's very well used in the cities because that's pretty thin and that's a way, to reduce noise a little bit and to be very impervious. Next one. So next one is just to show the machine. So the good thing about that machine is self-propelled machine. That means you don't need a plant or anything to move everything in on it. So it's a safe on the upside. Everything has to be thought about emulsion and things, but that's just logistics. Everything is on the machine and that's pretty well done. Next. I still insist on that. That's why that's in Spanish, okay? Because I think we have really to stay in the green. Yellow is maybe what you want to do, but red is not what we want to do. And social media will be very bad with you on the red ones, okay? Cost of vehicles will go up. CO2 will go up also because people are going to spend more gas due to the bad pavement, okay, even if it's unpaved or paved. So I think that's quite important to look at road maintenance the right way, to do some nice plans for the future and not to forget that. Rural roads are like every kind of roads. We have to maintain them the best way we can with finance, if we can, obviously that's something else. But I think that's very, very important. And that's something we want to really to improve on that TC 2.2.3 to show that road maintenance is the key for the future, to reduce CO2 and to do a lot of things. I didn't talk about coal mixes because this is kind of different and that's kind of, I would say, more European. But I think coal mixes are also a nice way to reduce CO2 by using reclaimed asphalt pavement wrap, to be able to recycle the pavement in the right way. Okay. Next, please. Which is important here. This is not too much my email, but that's the website. IBEF is the International Bitumen Emulsion Federation, and all the documents on that website will be in French, English, and the language you care the most of is Spanish. So you have English, French, and Spanish on that website. A lot of documents are available on Bitumen Emulsion on the website. And I think this is the most important thing for you to remember. Bitumen Emulsion is coming from 1923, so it's kind of 100 years old, but I think that's a very, very important technique to maintain roads. And roads are the first social media. So I think that's very important to keep that alive. Thank you very much. See you.
Muchísimas gracias, ingeniero François, por su...
Thank you so very much, Mr. Genon, for your brilliant presentation. And now I'm going to introduce Bernardino Capra, the coordinator of the Rural Road Committee in the Argentina Road Association. So welcome, and you have the floor. Thank you, Andrea, and the Paraguayan Road Association for the invitation, and now I'm going to share my screen.
Bien. Y ahí estamos. Voy a apagar el teléfono, que es fundamental. Bien.
Let me turn off my cell. And my presentation is about a few experiences in Argentina with stabilized materials. You can see the presentation, right? Yes. So first, I'm going to start with a brief introduction of the road as an engineering work, and then I'm going to talk about the road network in Argentina and some of the stabilization work being carried out in the province of Buenos Aires, and then my final conclusions. I want to recommend emphatically this document from the PIARC from year 2014 about the cost of annual preservation of rural roads. This is a very valuable material, especially when you go to small municipalities or small local districts and you start asking about how long those roads are. You start obtaining some answers, but when you start asking about the gutters and the bridges, the information that you get is a little bit more diffuse. This is because decision makers at the road network, even if it is a local network, have no idea about what it means to have an inventory of their facilities. So this PIARC manual is exactly about how little developing countries devote to the road networks and how this results in big costs. Let me start my presentation itself by showing you this drawing with a profile of a rural road. And first I want to show you that these works are engineering works and they have to be treated as such. In this drawing, you can see all the geometrical dimensions of the road, pumping, shoulder, run-off points, subrace, slope, etc., etc. And of course, each topography has its own intrinsic development. That is to say, it's not the same to have a road on the plain terrain versus the mountains. But what I'm trying to say here is that we need to do planning for what's the geometry of our road is going to be. And it is important to take this into account when it comes to stabilizing a road. You need to consider the geometry of the road, and it's not just an issue of having good intentions on the part of the engineer or the ground operator or the field coordinator, we need to make an effort from the design and in every step of the way not to degrade the conditions for that road. Here I'm showing you what I'm saying. This is the profile of a rural road, and these pictures are showing us roads that are very poorly maintained. That is to say, there's bad runoff, there are shoulders that are above the, the surface, there's bad use of the soil. In the picture with the crash, you have a case of bad use of the soil, and that is in detriment of safety. Then you have uh, another accident with a piece of equipment. The other one is excess of load in the truck, rotting, potholes, shoulders that have no drainage. Again, another example of deficient drainage. And I could go on and on describing these pathologies of the road that are not the case in every road, of course, but we have to take into account that preservation should not go or should not go against the road that you're trying to preserve. Here you have a drawing that shows the different levels from the axis to the side with the leveling machine. And so there's accumulation of soil and there's rotting where the road becomes kind of a canal. Every time there's rainfall, it takes more time for the road to recover. So in road engineering, we are always talking about resilient road. So if it is better maintained, it's more resilient. And here we can start talking about stabilizing that road. The data that we have from the province of Buenos Aires in Argentina, in the roads between the top drawing and the bottom drawing, there's 10% more time of usage for the picture at the bottom because it is better stabilized and better shaped than the other one. Now, if we go to the classification of the road network in Argentina, we have national roads that connect important urban centers, then cities or towns that connect with those big urban centers, which is the provincial network. And then there's unpaved provincial network connecting stations, and the municipal or local network connecting with different farms, for example. So we have 85,000 kilometers of paved roads and around 650,000 kilometers of unpaved roads. And this number is very significant because in the local network, we don't have a proper inventory of the network. So we can say that 12% of the total network is paved and 88 is not paved. And out of that 88%, only 7% has been stabilized. So the first conclusion here is that we have a deficit of at least 11% of the provincial network, which is unpaved, which should at least be stabilized. So we are saying that we should have at
las redes
least
de caminos de tierra
70,000 more kilometers that are stabilized. The dirt roads in Argentina
prácticamente el 20% es de tierra.
are very heterogeneous. They are concentrated basically in the central areas. The province of Buenos Aires is the size of Italy, and it's 30% smaller than Paraguay. And here we have 33% of the GDP that is produced in Argentina. So the farming production is huge. This province, the province of Buenos Aires, started with a stabilization plan for rural roads, starting with 6,000 meters, 15 meters thick, 15 centimeters thick, and 1.5 meters wide for each lane. There's reshaping of the basic tracks with gutters, signaling a maximum of 60 kilometers per hour because of the geometry of the road, metallic ward rails, and preservation for a year, maintenance for a year. The works, the contract establishes that this is supervised by the road association of the province of Buenos Aires, where I work, and the benefits, it will benefit 220 schools, 93 stopping points, and 228 dairy establishments. The total length is 2,300 kilometers, and the total amount is going to be $150 million. We are a federal country, and each municipality is autonomous, but they will receive subsidies for the purchase of road machinery and gutters plus stabilization materials for an amount that is around $15 million to date. This is going to generate synergies for the local communities where people want more stabilized roads, and we are hoping this is going to be the kickoff point so that we continue with this enhancement plan. Regarding stabilization types, the province has stone soils in the south, sandy soils in the west, and clay in the east. So for each type of soil, we have different stabilization agents, and for better use of the materials and the resources, we chose granulated stabilizing agents plus hydraulic agents and ionic agents. The transportation distances, as I said, the province is very large, and transportation of stones is very costly, especially during the harvest time, because lots of machinery is being used, machinery and trucks are being used for transportation of grain to the port. And 1/3 of the value of the stones used for the works have to do with transportation. So granular stabilization in certain regions were used with a support value of 60%. We were very lax regarding the specifications to enable the use of materials that are not maybe first quality, that are usually used for concrete. Regarding hydraulic stabilization materials, the resistance in the probes is more than 12 kilos per square centimeter, cured at 7 days. with water use, which makes the test very demanding to obtain high resistance, and it's integrated to the surface with 30 kilos of stones per square meter that are used in the final compacting stage for better roadworthiness. When it comes to the materials used in stabilization, it could be lime, it could be cement and lime, or it could be a hydraulic binding agent. What happened with ionic technologies? Well, we use ionic stabilization in many municipalities. It's prevailing. It's a technology that is much more inexpensive than the other two, but we have not conducted acceptance tests. And when you contract this kind of works, which is 15 kilometers long, not having the acceptance or the quality test did not enable us to include it in these specifications, because the technology measures swelling effects, but we are making progress in putting together control tests. I want to say that I liked Ms. Perry's presentation, because that's what you need to do. Go to the local level and go to the person working on the machine and train them. That has to be our motto, both for the Argentinian and the Paraguayan or any other road association. We need to provide training so that the good practices are our bread and butter every day instead of the exception, especially for maintenance in rural roads. We have to promote multi-year plans. You cannot think about only 1 year or only one administration. You have to work with a longer horizon. And finally, we have to investigate or research acceptance protocols to deal with quality in ionizing stabilization, because it is generalized, its use is generalized in the country. We have some materials we have developed with the basic content that you need in case you do planning or control of works in rural roads. Thank you very, very much. I want to thank Engineer Florentin and Engineer Nicolas Barreta and the president of the Paraguayan Association of Roads, as well as the Argentinian Road Association. And also thank you, Andrea Perez, who has been very kind and helped me with the preparation.
Una excelente presentación,
Thank you
muchísimos
very much, Mr. Bernardino Capra. It was a lovely presentation with a lot of data. And thank you very much for sharing all this information with us. We'll now move on to the next presentation by Mr. Ernesto Barrera. He is the coordinator of PIARC Strategic Topic #1. He is also a member of the executive committee, and he's been working with us for a lot of years. Ernesto, you have the floor. Hello, can you hear me? Thank you very much, particularly to the Paraguayan Road Association, who has invited me to take part in this seminar and given me the possibility to present the experience of the basic road program in Chile. Having seen previous presentations, I hope I can be up to the same standard. We have this program that has been born a few years ago, and it hasn't stopped growing since. Well, we'll talk about the context, the problems that we had to solve, how the program was made official and formalized. And as I was saying, this program involves preservation techniques for unpaved roads with low density traffic. It is associated to the basic road program that seeks to improve the neighboring populations' quality of life, safety, and contribute to local development. Given that these roads have low density traffic, they do not have enough social profitability, so they can be paved in the short or medium term. So these basic solutions provide a possibility to protect the surface of the pavements. And these are durable solutions, lasting solutions that prevent damage caused by any kind of exposure to which the road may be affected by. And we developed a 5,000 kilometer basic road program in the year 2003. And from then onwards, until the year 2008, 2009, the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Social Development, which back then was called the Ministry of Planning, took part in it. And in 2009, they carried out an assessment because some regulations were developed, and we started a new plan with 15,000 kilometers. And in the last program that we have developed, we have finished 10,000 kilometers. So what was the problem that we had to solve regarding gravel or dirt roads? That we are losing non-renewable resources, and we're doing it over and over again, and this damages agricultural production. Of course, it's not comfortable for users to have dirt roads instead of paved roads. That may cause road safety issues. We receive complaints due to excess dust, the low transitability, and the lack of connectivity with urban areas that prevent urban local development and not allow access to primary services such as schools or banks. And of course, this damaged the image of the government. There was an important campaign at a national level, and they said that we were not fulfilling the population's need. So we created this basic road program, and it has paved 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers per year, and we have solved the lack of connectivity by paving these roads. We've also have reduced the excess dust, and now people are no longer complaining about the dust in the air, but they complain because, of course, as we have more traffic, the roads are getting in a worse condition, and that has to be improved. We have also solved the issue of all damages to agricultural production. And this not only benefits agricultural production, but it also benefits all the trucks and the vehicles that took the produce. And why did this program go through changes in terms of budget? And that was because the Ministry of Finance was looking at this program that was successful, but our budget department was saying that these resources were not meant for paving, but for other things. So we have a twofold problem in the Ministry of Finance, because the Ministry of Planification and Development felt they were not they were not taking an active role in this program. And by assessing this government program that ended up in an agreement in 2011, it's important to show you this slide because it gave us a framework where we could apply these basic road solutions. Because a standard change requires geometric improvement, soil movement, sanitation. Of course, the pavement structure also changes, especially when we have heavy or high density traffic. And we need also to have a comfortable surface. And in our basic roads, we are improving the surface. We are reducing preserving interventions. We are not making changes every month. We implemented more lasting solutions. We do not make any kind of geometric improvement that is very specific. And we have also established a maximum amount and a limit for our basic road project. And our road should not surpass 400 vehicles per day. In our case, we do not go over $300 per kilometers. But in a normal project, we are already surpassing $1.5 million. So the research is also an important aspect to take into account. And the agreement that I was talking about that was reached in 2011 had to do with the fact that the program was divided into two. A preservation program, where we could take action directly, and the intermediate program, where we carried out certain improvements and we needed to get an approval regarding how profitable it was. And I would also like to show you a few solutions and solutions with stabilizers. So regarding Bitumen Solutions, we have a granular layer, which is the one that we want to reinforce and strengthen using a granular base. We also have the platform. And then we do the tack coat to put the surface layer. And what we want to do is to have a surface layer that protects the investments that we did in the granular layer. We want to protect the granular layer so that with heavier traffic, we don't have to be constantly reprofiling it, and it can last longer. And in that way, we can have better roads. And regarding the protection layers that we have, we've got reinforced priming. We've got simple surface treatments. We've got the TSS, the DTS, the Cape Seal, the OTA Seal. We've got the slurry. We've got different solutions, micro paving as well, and other solutions that we can implement. And here you have a series of recommendations regarding reinforced priming. We use sand. And what we have established in our road manual is the operation that is described, and we specify all the controls for the dosification and the standards that this technique requires. Here we have some solutions that may not be perfect, but they have provided a solution for that particular situation. Also for the slurry, we have that operation or technique described in our road manual. We have all these specifications related to how to prepare the surface, the bitumen emulsion, all the controls. And here we have some pictures as well of how what our solutions look like. And the idea is to take advantage of all the surface width that we have. We cannot enter private property. So that will depend on our engineers to see how they can come up with the best geometric solution for a particular surface area, because we cannot really make major changes or build on private property. So we have to adapt to the surface that we have available. We also have simple superficial treatments that has been explained in previous presentations, is the use of granular material over primer, and is a more popular solution. It's important to have also the road marks in all of our applications. We also have double surface or superficial treatments that is also in the road manual in volume 5, where we have outlined all the specifications and provided solutions. Regarding Cape Seal, that is a technique that has been brought from South Africa. It comes from Cape Town. That's why it's called Cape Seal. And like 20 years ago, professionals from the road departments weren't there to see what they were doing. And they have a double layer with superficial treatment and slurry, which are two different techniques, but are applied in the same solution. There's an image. The termination is that of a slurry. And then we've also got the OTA Seal, which has been also brought by our experts from Norway and they went to see how it worked, and they taught us how to do it, to implement it. It's for low density traffic. And it's been implemented at a national level. We have 3 areas that are limited according to their climate and their geographical conditions. The north, where the Atacama Desert is found, the center region, and also the south region, the southern region, where we have a lot of rain and colder weathers. So all of these techniques have also to be adapted to the geographical conditions. Ernesto, we're a little bit over the time, so if you can sum up. So this is the last technique, which is for specific cases with specific slopes and curves. These are very special cases. We also have solutions that use stabilizers. And we have used hydraulic cement, different chlorides. In the north, we have huge reserves of sodium chloride. And we have also used magnesium chloride, which lasts for 2 or 3 years, and they have been very useful in the northern part of the country. We have only used hydraulic cement, and we mix it with granular material. And we are doing that now, implementing some recycling techniques. And here I wanted to illustrate some of the ways in which we've been working. Ionic stabilizers. We have also worked a lot with those stabilizers in the south, in the Patagonia. And these have been used in very specific regions. So with our basic road programs, we have been able to decrease the frequency of the times when we needed to do preservation. We have improved people's quality of life by diminishing dust. We have improved local development by developing agriculture. We have also improved the surface for roads with low density traffic, and we have also managed to make the most of the available raw materials around the area so that we can diminish the use of granular material. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And I'm open to any question or comment that you may have.
Bueno, muchas gracias, ingeniero Ernesto Barrera de Chile. Gracias por su
Thank you very much, Engineer Barrera from Chile, for your presentation. Now we're going to have Miguel Caso Flores as the moderator for this Q&A session. Miguel, you have the floor. Thank you very much. We've heard 4 excellent presentations. Thank you. And we have a number of questions, but only 15 minutes. So I will ask the speakers to please answer in 1 minute if possible. And if you want to add more information to some other answer, do it in 30 seconds. First question is for Robustino Pineda by Ángel José Veragüero. And it's like this. How does truck traveling affect local roads? How can we improve the conditions so that these local roads can resist heavy traffic from trucks? Well, actually, we don't do sizing taking into account future traffic. We size according to the current traffic. In the case that I presented in our Paraguayan experience, we recommended to the Ministry of Public Works an alternative, for example, in the case of curves, so that in the future, the next improvement works on that road, depending on circumstances, make it possible to implement the improvements to adequate the road to future traffic. Thank you, engineer.
pregunta es para François.
Next question is for François from Guzman Steiner from Uruguay, and it's like this.
You have any experience in using lime, calcium or H2 in asphalt mix to improve the lifetime of roads? François?
I'm still alive. Yes, we have some experience. Usually when I work for my previous company, I didn't like lime because that was additional cost. Anyway, we found that lime was quite interesting when you have some issue with water resistance of the hot mix, because lime will give you a very good, I would say, a better resistance for the water, which is quite important because it's on top layers. Otherwise, the issue we have with hot mix, there is no durability test. So this is very difficult to judge on the long term. So it's a 50-50 answer. Yes, that can be improving water resistance, but usually we don't have too much experience on the long term for this kind of product. But I think that's always good. Lime is always good, you know, for mixes anyway. All right, thank you.
Muchas gracias, François.
Thank you so much, François. Next question is for Bernardino Capra, and it's like this. You showed us the advantages of having a red quota that is positive because they have superior availability. So can you compare the cost of going from negative to positive red quota, especially taking into account the benefits regarding availability? Well, I gave information, but I forgot some of the things that I wanted to say in the presentation. The red quota, the positive red quota has to do with having more distance between the water and the surface. It's not necessary if you have high terrain. Second of all, you need to conduct a hydraulic study because the life of the road is not the basic work, but the hydraulic work around it. So water, we know water is the worst enemy of the road. The road may have high elasticity. Resilience is going to be affected every time you have rainfall, and the hydraulic equation is bad. I think that's the answer to your question. Regarding cost, there's a wide range, and it depends. It depends on the use of quarries from the environmental point of view. So the use of the soil has to be minimized. But I showed a photo of a van transporting people that was blocked there because they didn't take into account the hydraulic side of the equation. Thank you, Mario. Now, next question is for Ernesto Barrera.
Rubén Darío Lomas y dice,
From Rubén Darío Lomas. The use of kerosene has brought about any claims from the environmental point of view? Well, not claims per se, but some time ago it was forbidden to use kerosene in asphalt mixes. So there's legislation about that. And nowadays we are not using it anymore. Next question is for Mr. Pineda. This is a question from Johnny Picani Vermella. The problem with geometric design that does not comply with minimum radius, for example, is very common in our countries because the public agencies give priority to affordability and to avoidance of political problems. But if you don't comply with these requirements, there may be more accidents because the roads become more dangerous. So is it possible for the standards and regulations to be more demanding, especially in terms of lighting, for example, to improve safety? Well, as was mentioned in my presentation, this is a new situation that has happened in the last 5 years with massive repavement of local roads. This is a whole challenge for the country, and the standards and regulations do not take into account these local rural roads that are being paved. And if you pave them, the traffic and the speed increase. So it does require more special signage, and the Ministry of Public Works should have resources available so that the roads are designed properly. So a decision needs to be made in to include this classification of these roads in the general classification that the ministry does of the whole network. This question is for Francois. You mentioned the life cycle of pavement represented with an ED curve, where you represent the optimum point for an intervention. Do you know any administration doing this type of measurement in the whole network on a yearly basis to optimize the measures and the metrics? Do you recommend it? And third part, you have talked about IRI. Is it possible to do it with the smartphones?
This is for me or this is for somebody else?
Francois.
Yeah.
Francois, you were not in the English channel?
Oh, sorry, no, I was listening to you because I thought to switch.
Okay.
No, I think the first question was, do you know any administration who are using this graph, I guess, or something like that?
That is measuring the IRI, the International Road Index, every year,
IRI.
and they take it as a base to make the interventions. And if you recommend it, that's the second one.
I think IRI is part of it, but I think usually for rural roads, I think visual aspects is usually what is done. That means people have to go on site, to see what's going on. I think visual aspect is important. I think IRI is mostly used for, I would say, medium and high traffic roads, and that's always the best way to look at it. And I remember a study done in Canada. They were looking at IRI and the evolution on 7 years, and they found that the increase of cost linked to more gasoline, more repairs for the cars, was comparing to the cost of CO2 linked to that, in 6-7 years. So I think in Europe, more and more because of the Green Deal and everything, we're looking at more and more CO2. And I think IRI is a very good measurement because that's really what the driver see when he drives his cars. Okay, I think it's quite important. But I think IRI is not enough. I think visual aspects of all the equipment now we have on the market, to look at the roads are important also. And drainage, I think, is something else. I think IRI will not see the drainage. I think drainage is quite important, and either in Africa or in South America, and what I understood during those 2 days, I think the drainage is something quite important to look at. IRI is important, but I think not only that. Visual aspects, drainage, I think this is a complete view of what's going on the road. I think that's quite important. I saw some question on base course also. That's why we didn't read that. I think base courses are very important, and the quality of the aggregates used for unpaved roads. I think Osvaldo is looking at that also on the TC 2.2.3.
Muchas gracias, François.
De nada, de nada.
Bien, nos quedan 4 minutos. Voy a hacer una pregunta a Ernesto de cosecha propia.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question to Ernesto.
Ernesto, este programa de caminos básicos rurales, perdón,
program of basic roads in Chile is a reference point for not only for our continent, but other continents. You mentioned the technical side, but I would like you to talk about the political side and the communicational side. When you achieve those goals, 5,000 kilometers, 6,000 kilometers, etc., does the president go to cut the ribbon for these last 2 communities in Chile, for example, these forgotten rural areas in Chile? This is something that used to be very rare. So how did you handle the political and communicational campaign so that your rural road program was a success? Well, it's a long answer, but here we've had authorities that participated and were very much interested in our program. And this provided a link between the technical side and the political side, both from the president's office and the Congress and the regional authorities. We have 16 regions with their governors, as well as municipal authorities. So we've received a lot of support, and the communicational side was very important. And nowadays, since we started this program, every 500 kilometers, there was a cutting of the ribbon ceremony. And in the north, for example, which is 2,500 kilometers from Santiago de Chile, and the authorities would go when we got to kilometer 1,000 to cut the ribbon. If it was in the Patagonia in Chile, they would go. In the center of the country, they would go and participate in these events with the community. So the authorities talked about their commitment with the community, and people were thrilled when they heard that there was a commitment to finish a secondary school, for example, and they wanted to participate and share their experience with other people. So everybody was on board and contributing to clean the roads, for example. That shows a bond between the authorities and the community. And there were meetings with the community, conversations with the community members to see what expectations they had, and the design became or their demands or their needs became part of the specifications that were demanded from the contractors. So we are also accountable for the development of this project, and the authorities ask for explanation when we don't achieve the goals. So in sum, it was a very significant program. In the last 20 years, we did almost 20,000 kilometers. And doing traditional pavement, it wouldn't have been possible. We would have achieved only 10%. So that's the general answer to your question. We're going to close the session with one more question for all of the speakers. This question is from Carlos San. Apart from the road geometrical designs and the support bases and layers, do the speakers think that most of the resources should be assigned or allocated to management of underground water in construction of rural roads? Well, Bernardino, in Argentina, we have lots of resources that are in the hands of the municipalities. And in general,
un manejo bastante discrecional en cuanto al mantenimiento, pero
they do discretional maintenance, but sometimes you don't have an engineer in the municipality. So this question has an engineering background, and I cannot probably provide an answer, but when we have to explain what the cut and fill means, many of the municipalities don't even know that there's an Argentinian Road Association. So when we talk about how to allocate funds and we talk about water management, is a very long and convoluted discussion. In general, municipalities do what they can with their resources. That's the answer, the short answer I can give you. Just in 30 seconds, I want to complete. Yes, I will ask all of you to say something about this. Okay, we have, Ernesto, we can hear you, yes. Here in Chile, our road program is supplemented by a contract program for the territory of the whole country. We have almost 85,000 kilometers under some contract. So when there's roads that do not have enough cut and fill, okay, we make sure that there's prior preparation. And we've seen in these presentations that you need a good preparation, because if not, even if you do great work, it will be destroyed by water. So through the preservation program, we take into account cut and fill so that when the solution comes, the road is ready for that solution. Thank you, Ernesto. Francois?
Francois, do you agree that we use an important part of the budget? Yeah.
I listen to everything. For the 2.3, I talked to a small town in France, and that town had 30 kilometers of paved roads and 25 of unpaved roads. The main issue they have right now is linked to the farmers. It is the size of the equipment used by the farmers and the tonnage of the equipment. This is wider and this is heavier. So that's an issue for them. And on that unpaved road, you know, they have some, usually that's farmers on the bottom of the road. So they have some issue between private and municipalities, but usually they deal with it. I talk also to the forest we have a forest national office, and they are dealing with 60,000 of roads, unpaved, and sometimes paved. They are paved when the percentage of the slope is more than 10%, and over 15 they are using cement concrete. Not my favorite product, but I think that's life. And what they found, which was interesting too, that they found that by using sometimes some different kind of aggregates, like a limestone in the mountain because it was cheaper, they found some change in the flowers linked to the change of the kind of aggregate they were using for the unpaved road. That means they found some flowers they never saw before because they switched from, I would say, very strong stones to limestone because it was cheaper. And they had some change on the fauna, I think, or on the flora, on those local areas. But that was kind of just to tell you. But the main issues in France right now is finance. That's why we try to promote the curve I show in order to tell people that they have to do the right technique on the right road at the right time in order to save money on the long term. Okay, that's the main thing.
Muchas gracias, François.
Thank you, François.
De nada.
De gestión de las
One
aguas
final word from our fourth speaker about this point. Well, in fact, there's no specific management for this point in Paraguay. Everything is done by the Public Works Ministry. And regarding means of communication, even though municipalities and the governor's offices have resources, their application is left for them to decide. If maybe they may have an agreement signed with the Ministry of Public Works. Thank you to all of our speakers. It's been an excellent presentation today, a very session which was the most technical one.
Muchas gracias.
And now I'm going to give the floor to Andrea to close the meeting for today. Thank you, Miguel, and thank you to all the speakers in this roundtable, which was really interesting. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to all of the participants, organizers, and the speakers for joining today. And tomorrow we will have our last day of this great event with very interesting topics.